Now, you still got your statement there, sir?
Yes, I do.
You described that on the 24th of July, the Sunday, at about 2:30, we had a disagreement. We've dealt with that. And as you testified this week, in summary, what you put down in your statement then that Sunday morning was, I quote, "We got to room and I decided to leave again to go and drink at my friend's room. My wife, in a gown and no shoes, followed me to his room." That was your summary, correct?
That is correct.
Just tell me one thing. As Susan were following you, and trying to prevent you from moving and ending up at Brendan Miller's room, how was she using her hands?
Occasionally she was, are you referring to after I left Simone's room?
Well, after you left your room, then you moved up to Simone's room, and from there she was outside, correct, as you testified, and from there you moved on to Brendan Miller's room.
It was a combination of she was standing in front of me sometimes. That's when the guard saw us. He was on that little, where you sort of turn the corner, he was in that vicinity somewhere. She was standing in front of me sometimes. Other times she was grabbing my jersey, pulling my jersey from behind, setting her arms away like that. So it was a combination of those movements.
Using one hand, or then both hands,
Well,
one and the other?
If she would grab my left sleeve, I'd hit it away with my left sleeve. If she grabbed my right sleeve, I'd hit it away with the right sleeve. So it was a combination of movements.
And fair to say that at the time, the gown that she was wearing had the belt on and it was tied. It wasn't flapping open as she was naked under that gown. Is it so?
I would have recalled if it was wide open, so I can only assume that the gown, the belt must have been on. But I mean, I'm assuming that because it's logical.
Well, apart from logical, you were there with her, and I put it to you, surely you would have seen if she had no belt in the gown and it was just flapping nakedness, cold night, everybody to see her like that, whoever
Yes,
was seeing.
And hence my answer to that was that it was logical to assume that she would have had the belt on.
Now, again, to go and drink at my friend's room, put it to you, that's a euphemism, a very toned down version of exactly what happened there. You would agree?
Not entirely, because you must remember when we were leaving the bar, I was invited by Gray and by Kyle to that after party. So, you know, I mean, I was clearly hoping that Jolene would have been at the after party, so if that's what you're getting at, the answer is yes. But I wanted to go and congregate with the rest of the people at the after party.
But that is not what the fight was with your wife that night. It was about Jolene. That was the core issue. Isn't that so?
Yes, that was the catalyst. That's right.
But nothing of that was said here. Correct?
No, and once again, I'm not going to stand in front of sit in front of my father-in-law and write that I wanted to go and visit my mistress in a statement. I mean, it's...
Now, writing that statement at the time and knowing now through testimony by various people, including Jane Newcomb and Mark Holmes and yourself, Susan would not back down from a fight. Correct? Altercation, word altercation, in that sense I'm using the word fight.
We were married for 23 years. We've had many, many arguments over the course of 23 years, and she had never caught me having an affair before, so this was a new experience for us. I mean, she was very, very angry and upset with me. But you know, as Mark testified, she was a very persistent person.
Because the state will argue what is to be found highly improbable is that when you arrived back in the room, she now achieved her mission of getting you into the hotel room to bed, just to allow you to go to sleep. Isn't that a fair comment?
Well, I think I can't talk for Susan, but I was absolutely exhausted. It was late in the morning. You know, we've had this major row for the last while. I was absolutely exhausted, so it wasn't a case of her allowing me to go to sleep. I just went to sleep. I don't, you know.
But you would agree that's out of her character to just stop the row there, get into bed with you, and sleep.
We had been carrying on this fight for a lengthy period of time. Maybe she was also exhausted. I mean, it was, as I said, it was very early in the morning. She had fallen on that ledge, and you know, I can't. You're asking me to talk for Susan. I can't talk for Susan.
What does the falling onto the ledge has to do with this?
Well, I mean, if you've fallen onto the ledge, she had cut her toes, she had that graze above her eyebrow. I mean, it had been an emotional evening. She'd caught me having back with my mistress. It had to end some time of the night. I mean, whether she went to bed at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, she also had to sleep at some stage.
Well, my understanding from you was you wanted to leave that room, and we know it's in the vicinity of around about 3 o'clock. We'll get to that particular details with the security guard that saw you, but you knew at the time, you testified to that you wanted to get out because she would continue 2-3 hours shouting, arguing with you. You were expecting that, isn't that so?
That's correct.
Now she got you back. Incidentally, what period of time are we talking that you left the room and you returned to the room? Half an hour?
I can't tell you. As I said, I have got no idea whatsoever what period of time.
Well, you didn't stay long at Brendan Miller's, correct?
No, I was there for a very short period of time.
Good. Now, walking from your room 221 to Brendan Miller's room, even taking into account the stop at Simony's room, could not have taken you more than 5, 8 minutes. Isn't that so?
You could be right, yes.
Spending a couple of minutes there, and she appeared in the door, called you out, you refused. Initially, or eventually you went, and you returned. Another
Yes.
5, 10 minutes, so half an hour in and out. She's ready for another period, isn't that? Of sorting you out. Shouting, talking. Not to go to sleep. That's how you argued, isn't that so?
That's exactly what I said, because that's exactly what happened. I arrived back in the room, I took my clothes off, I slept in my underwear, and I climbed into my side of the bed and I went to sleep.
And you want us to believe that she allowed that just like that?
I'm telling you what happened, Advocate. Whether you believe it or not, I'm telling you exactly what happened.
Now, you testified at length how ostracized you felt and rejected leading up to the funeral after you admitted being an adulterer, lying to Susan, to your 3 daughters. Correct?
I don't think I testified at length. I was asked the question, did I feel ostracized? And the answer was yes, but to say that I testified at length is not correct.
Well, if necessary, we'll go in greater detail into this part of your evidence. Also, the whole issue of how you were arrested, kept in the cells, and the bail application, but the police had a post-mortem report given to them by Dr. Khan on the Tuesday. Independently, you don't know him at all, correct?
That is correct.
He came to a certain conclusion of the cause of death, right? You disagreed with that, correct?
Well, having listened to the trial, he came to the conclusion of the cause of death the moment he arrived on the scene.
Well, that's your version. Let's leave that for the moment.
Sorry, Mr. van der Kerk, I've just been given a note by my registrar that the stenographer indicated that there's interference, which is now becoming unbearable with the recording, and it seems to be cell phone interference. I don't know if it's perhaps the vibration. My knowledge is just limited on this.
I suggest, my lady, that everybody just check whether the cell phones are off, not just on silent. I think that might solve it.
Okay. Thank you. Everybody could do that. Thank you.
See, he's nodding. Maybe solved now. So, apart from Dr. Khan's evidence, Sergeant Apollos had also the version that you gave, and he had the version of Desmond Daniels. So don't you think?
And that is not true. The witness flew down to Cape Town specifically to give his version to Sergeant Apollos at speed with the demonstration, and that was cancelled. They never had his version.
Lady, we've just dealt with a version which was given to the police on that Sunday. That's the version I'm referring to.
Thank you. Proceed.
Now, don't you think, based on only that as a start. The police need to investigate, and that you appear to be a suspect. If one looks at what Desmond Daniels said in his first statement compared to what you said.
Well, Advocate, had the police investigated as what you just said, by simply picking up the phone and speaking to my mother-in-law and to my sister-in-law, who you would think they would be the first person they have talked to, I wouldn't have been labelled a wife batterer. If they hadn't come forward with those affidavits to describe those bruises, that label would have stuck with me. So I think the state needs to ask just how much investigation they did to look at both sides of the story.
You see, sir, we had your version cryptically. You've already admitted in court that some of it was a lie that was given in front of your family that Sunday.
What part was a lie?
And we had on Monday a statement that Sergeant Apollos obtained, taken by Constable Fernandez on instructions of Captain September.
I refute that. You put it to me that my version was a lie. I would like to know what part was a lie.
You have to answer my questions, sir.
So you can't. Okay.
Putting your statement from the Sunday there, putting the statement of Desmond Daniels there, how he found her, it's opposite. You say she was hanging. He says no, she was lying on the floor. Who to believe? How are we going to resolve that?
Well, Mr. Daniels has come and presented his evidence, and with the greatest respect, I think we'll let the court decide whose version to believe.
I'm talking about what the police knew as events unfolded in that week. Don't you think it was reasonable of the police to contact you, to expect you to come down, and to consider you at the time as a suspect?
I think the police have got a job to do, absolutely right, and they have to do their job properly. So when Sergeant Apollos phoned me on Tuesday the 26th of July, as I've testified, I was very, very happy. I was relieved to come down. And I mentioned that to my in-laws at the time who were staying with me. Because had they allowed me to meet them at Spear with Mr. Hassan, as what they arranged, I could have shown them exactly how Susan was hanging behind the door. I could have pointed out exactly what had transpired that evening. But there was clearly no desire on the police, based on the autopsy, based on Dr. Khan's findings at the scene. I read Sergeant Apollos' affidavit, and he was instructed by Dr. Khan to open up a homicide docket in his affidavit on the day. So the decision had already been made. That's my understanding of it, and that's my reading of it. So the fact that they cancelled the meeting with me on the 26th shows that they'd already made their mind up. And I use an example of just looking for other evidence, simply by picking up the phone and talking to my mother-in-law with regard to that bruise where Dr. Khan labelled it as symptomatic of a battered wife syndrome. That could have been dealt with straight away, but it wasn't, because there was no desire on the police to look for anything.
No,
So I think the police have to answer for that. They also need to explain themselves.
no desire by the police to look for anything.
Well, surely as a policeman, you have to be objective. You have to look, if a person's guilty, then he's guilty. But if he's innocent, you've also got to present that evidence. You know, they go and take statements from people that work with me in my house for 15 years. Those statements don't get presented. I mean, how do you explain that?
Put yourself in the shoes of Neville Holmes. He used the word fight. You try to tone it down. They're absolutely shocked that Sue could have committed suicide, as you said. Now the police is in possession of a statement by Desmond Daniels, who incidentally you've never met before, correct?
That is correct.
Have you been to Spear before?
I've been to Spear 2 or 3 different occasions over the years.
And you were very happy with their professionalism, the way they treated guests, correct?
Yes, it's a very nice place.
And you were happy to go there again for your annual get-together in that July 2016, correct?
I mean, I never chose the venue, but I was more than happy to go. It's a very nice place.
And you've heard the testimony, and we'll get to it shortly. Mr. Desmond Daniels, he didn't know at all what was happening, what was going to happen when he knocked at your door politely before you opened it and asked him to open the bathroom door, correct?
That is correct.
So the police is facing with a statement from him which is complete opposite from what you say. Now, having said that, put yourself in the shoes of Mr. Neville Holmes. He's just lost his daughter. You've got a version. The police being told by Dr. Khan, this is what he thinks. There's a statement of Desmond Daniels. What would you expect the police to do now? Just believe you?
I would expect them to meet me at Spear as what they undertook, to take me through exactly what transpired at the very least, and from there they can make a decisive decision of what to do. Isn't that how the justice system is meant to work?
Well, what's wrong with having your version and Mr. Desmond Daniels' version and having it here presented in court? That's fair, isn't it, sir?
So what you're saying is that you will arrest somebody without presenting all the evidence, and let the guy take his chances in court.
I'm putting it to you, sir, that your family at the time, just before the funeral, had all the right in the world to question your story.
They did, because they were told that I was culpable of Susan's murder. That is why Neville, on the 24th of July, was checking bathroom doors. Why would he be checking bathroom doors? Who gave him that information? Maybe the police need to investigate how my father-in-law could start checking bathroom doors. Where did that come from? And this is an hour after he arrived. How is that possible?
You state to everybody at the time this was a suicide, no homicide, correct?
Because I told the truth.
But yet, your father-in-law, if I understand you correctly, is not allowed to go where his daughter committed suicide.
I never said that. I never said that at all. When did I ever say he's not allowed to go where his daughter committed suicide?
You would agree that Susan committing suicide is totally out of character for her, right?
It came as a complete and utter shock to me. Yes, I would agree with that.
As well as to the rest of the family, Peter Norton.
To the whole family, that is
Yeah.
correct.
And now they're faced with the fact that you've lied to them and to Susan that you had a relationship with somebody else. So they're faced with you as a liar. Why do they want to believe you in part what happened there that early morning versus believing you at all?
So if I follow your line of thinking, advocate, if you're an adulterer, you're a murderer. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, and I won't belabor this point further, there wasn't only your story.
How did my father-in-law know Mr. Daniels' story? How is that possible?
Do you understand the mixed emotions your immediate family, Sue's family, had at the time?
Absolutely. And it's completely justifiable. But those mixed emotions were completely fueled by the fact that my father-in-law had been indicated on the scene that I was culpable for Susan's death.
Do you think he was totally out of line, unreasonable, thinking
I
that?
don't think if that was my daughter, I would react exactly the same. So, exactly the same. But that's not my point. My point is, he arrived on the scene. He was basically told that I was culpable for Susan's death, and from there it was, I mean, I can't blame him. I can't blame my family. I also have a daughter. If I was told that somebody had done that to my daughter, I would react exactly the same way.
So is that evidence before this court that he was told? No.
I'm going to explore that now, my lady.
Okay.
Who told your father-in-law?
Who told my father-in-law what?
Answer the question. You brought it up.
Well-
He was told by whom?
He was inspecting the bathroom door. When we had the meeting on Friday with the whole family, they directly asked me, did I kill Susan?
Mm-hmm.
He said he even went into the bathroom. They allowed him into the bathroom, and he tested the bathroom hook.
You haven't answered the question.
He was obviously talking to one of the people outside, one of the detectives, one of the policemen outside. Why would he be looking at the bathroom door? Why would he be inspecting the door mechanism?
So now he was obviously talking versus he was told. Which is it?
He was led to believe that I was responsible for Susan's death.
He wasn't told, he was led to believe.
Yes.
Now, your brother-in-law, Mark Holmes, came to testify. And in a very honest, open, frank manner, he volunteered already in his statement that the words, I killed her, I killed her, I killed her, was mentioned to you. Right?
That is correct.
And you also said in your evidence, you can't dispute it, you can't recall it, but you can't.
I have no reason to disbelieve what Mark said.
The state will put forward an argument that, in fact, you did mention exactly what those words ordinary mean at the time when you spoke to Mark Holmes.
Sorry, just repeat that.
You meant what you wanted to say to him in that midnight call. In a moment of weakness, you spoke the truth. You did kill him.
Well, that's a very broad assumption to make, but it's not the truth. The truth is I feel responsible for Susan's death. I've told anybody and everybody, and as I've indicated, I have to carry that with me. So, did I kill her? Yes. Did I murder her? The answer to that is no.
See, obviously the difficulty, Mr. Rohde, is that nobody is here to speak on Susan's behalf. She's no longer here. We have to piece together what happened, what really happened there, specifically taking into account what Desmond Daniels saw, what we demonstrated here again in court this morning as to the knot, etc., etc.
Well, Mr. Daniels' different versions can be decided by the court. So I'm not quite sure which version you're referring to.
Court could just grant me a minute.
By all means.
Do you understand your evidence correctly that the testimony of Mr. Mark Holmes as to the feistiness of his sister, the way that she would not back down, she's very passionate. I'm referring to the record page 1978, line 5, and she had a temper. She would never give up. She would have gone at Jason. You agree with that?
I would agree with that.
In fact, he said she would be like a dog with a bone. She wouldn't let it go. That's a fair description of your late wife, correct?
Yes, I mean she had a temper.
Do you understand my difficulty to believe that you both just went off to sleep that Sunday morning? Nothing else happened before you fell asleep, word-wise.
My lady, that is not accurate. If you said that even you said both things.
It's a bit of semantics, my lady.
No, with respect, it's not semantics. He put it to the witness that they both fell asleep. That is not true or accurate.
Thank you.
Oh, I won't take it further. I'll argue it. Now, let's deal briefly with Farah Amira's evidence. Basically, you agreed who the parties were when you entered the room there, Brendan, Jolene, and Farah, correct?
That is correct.
You can't recall whether they were drinking. Your recollection was the door was open, you sat on a bed, and what you do dispute is that Susan did not come in to the room and took you by the arm as Vera testified. In summary.
I don't recall it like that. No, I don't. I recall her standing by the door shouting. So that's the way I recall it.
Well, it's maybe not that significant, but isn't it possible that it could have happened that you forgot that little piece? That she in fact did move into the room? Possibility?
I don't think so, because with Jolene being in the room and only two other people, I would have remembered her, especially if she had taken me by the arm. And I don't know, I forget what her testimony was, and pulled me out or something like that. And so, no, I would have remembered that part. So, no, I disagree with that.
Would you accept evidence that each one of them were drinking wine?
I can't comment on that. I don't know what they were drinking.
But they were drinking, correct?
No, I didn't see anybody drinking. As I said, I didn't see any glasses, I didn't see any bottles, so I can't tell you what they were drinking.
You're 100% sure of that?
Yes, I'm 100% sure. I didn't see any alcohol in the room. I mean, I'm not saying there wasn't alcohol, I'm just saying I didn't see it.
See, I just find it strange that Vera and Miriam would be completely wrong in stating that that's what happened. They were sitting drinking. And I would think it would be the thing to do at that time of the night, getting together. Don't you think so?
Advocate, I'm not denying that they were drinking. You asked me if I saw them drinking, and the answer is no, I didn't. I have no reason to say yes or no either way. If they were drinking, I would tell you. I don't remember seeing them drinking. There's nothing more I can say about that.
It was pretty cold outside that night, correct?
It was, yes, it was winter.
There were fireplaces in the room. You could lit the fire. Is that so?
You could light a fire. There are fireplaces at Spear, correct.
And one would expect the door to be closed because of the cold, correct?
You would think so. I mean...
And that's the testimony of Pharaoh. The door was closed before you entered. Would you accept that?
If that's what she says. I certainly didn't knock. Nobody came to the door, if that's what you're driving at. I don't remember somebody opening the door. So unless it was unlocked, I don't know. But I certainly don't remember somebody opening the door for me to come in.
And at the time, you've now reached your destination. You're rid of your wife. Your relief, a bit of emotional breather. You're now there sitting on the bed. It's good to see Jolene again, right?
Well, I hadn't got rid of my wife because I knew my wife was directly in my vicinity.
Disregarding that, this is where you wanted to be now, with your friends, colleagues, and your lover, correct?
Correct.
No matter what happened to Susan, you're here now. Door closed, you're now in the party of the other three, correct?
Incorrect.
What is incorrect?
The door wasn't closed because Susan was standing by the door shouting it for me to leave.
I'm putting it to you that Farah stated that... Just give me a minute. she handed up a sketch. That's what she can recall, where each one was sitting. You accepted that, correct?
Yes, that was.
Then she testified on page 2085 that the door opened. As you said, nobody opened the door for you. That was at line 21. The door opened and Jason Rohde walked in. He walked in and sat at the edge of the bed. He was quiet. Three of us currently in the room just looked at him. He sat there with his arms folded. And then she stated, shortly thereafter, the door opened again. It was Susan Rohde standing at the entrance. She was calling his name. Correct?
Advocate, I stand to be corrected, but the only way you can open those doors is with a key card. So how was the door opened without a key card?
You say that door was opened all the time.
According to your version, the door was closed. I opened the door. Then the door was closed behind me, and then the door opened again, and Susan came in. So I'm not understanding how you can get in the door without a key card.
My lady, I just want to consult here with Sergeant Adams for a moment.
You may.
You're aware that if there's a key card in the holder, that door can open and close by itself. Nobody from inside of the door's closed need to open it.
So are you saying that the key card was outside the door?
I'm saying that when you arrived there, the door was closed. You open it. Nobody opened it for you and you entered. And in a similar fashion, that's how your wife also arrived and entered.
What you're saying doesn't make sense, Advocate, because what you're saying then is that the key card was left outside the door. There's no key card on the inside of the door. The key card only works from the outside of the door. So what you're saying completely doesn't make sense.
I'm informed that, I think this is common course, that the card can be left at a place close to the door from the inside, and if it's in there, that door can be opened and closed, whether it's from the inside or the outside.
That is absolutely incorrect. That card, where you insert the card, is for the electricity. It's not for the door opening or closing. So that is just nonsense.
Now, you were there in that room. You were relieved to be away from your wife. You weren't in a hurry to leave again, correct?
When Susan arrived and stood by the door and called me to leave, I left immediately.
Immediately.
She called me 2 or 3 times and I left, so I don't know what other term to use.
So what were you thinking going there? You know she's with you, Susan. She's following you. She's trying to prevent you. And immediately you just go back to her? You want us to believe that?
But that's what your witness testified to. I got up and I left the room. So that's what your witness said.
I want to know what was your state of mind going into that room.
I wanted to get away from Susan.
But you knew she was following you.
Yes. That's why I was walking away.
And
I
then?
mean, I've said that for the last 3 or 4 days.
And then when she called you, just simply stood up and left with her.
Well, that's what your witness testified to.
I'm asking what you did, sir.
Exactly what I testified to, Advocate. I stood up and I left.
Vera Amir must say it didn't go that easily. You were reluctant to leave, and it makes sense. That's why you left initially.
She never said I was reluctant to leave. Please read that out in the record where she said I was reluctant to leave.
I can take you to the record, page 2094, line 4.
Page reference, please.
2094. Line 1. After Jason entered the room, Susan came to the door. She opened the door. She stood there. She called his name repeatedly. And then she testified he seemed reluctant to leave and slightly dismissive. And she left. She came back 1 or 2 more times thereafter. I can't remember exactly how many times. I remember her leaving and coming back. And in fairness to you, let me put the cross-examination as well at page 2096 by your advocate. Page 2096, line 10. It was put to Miss Amiria. Said it's not true. It's my client, as the record reflects. That's now referring to yourself. She did not come and go 2 or 3 times. She came there, called him eventually. He got up. Because he didn't want the scene and he left her. You eventually got up. Can you explain that to us?
What would you like me to explain?
What did your advocate mean when he said you eventually got up?
Maybe he meant I hesitantly got up. I'm not quite sure what to read into the word eventually.
So you were there. You gave instructions to my learned friend. Please tell us, what went through your mind when your wife called you the first time?
What went through my mind was that I didn't want for Susan and Jolene to have a confrontation in the room, and that was my motive to leave the room.
It doesn't make sense that you fled from your wife. Now you arrived at your destination, and now suddenly it's a turnaround and you go back so easily.
Whether it makes sense or not, advocate, that's what happened, because that's exactly what happened. I mean, that's what your witness testified. I did leave the room. Whether she said I left the room reluctantly or hesitantly, or whether my advocate said I left it hesitantly, the net result was that I left the room.
Ah. But there was a hesitant on your side, correct? You didn't really want it to go. No. I mean, I had been trying to escape Susan, so that would be a correct assumption. Good. Now you're outside. It's back to your room, back to the lioness's den. What shall we call it? What were you going to do when you left the room? Go back to your room, correct?
That is correct.
You're not voluntary going back with Susan to room 221. Is that so?
That is correct.
And then describe that walk back.
When I was walking back, Susan grabbed me by the back of my collar. Over here, it was a jersey collar. She yanked me back. I, with my right elbow tried to hit her arm away.
With the soft part?
No, not with the soft part.
Oh, with your heart?
I never testified with the soft part. When I left the room, when I initially left my room, that was with the soft part. I made contact with the tip of her nose. It gave me a bit of a shock. I actually turned around, I looked at her. There was no blood coming from her nose at all. I then carried on moving. She held me with both hands on the side of my jersey. I was swinging my arms left and right like this to try and get her off my jersey, and that is when she went over the little retaining wall on the right-hand side.
So it doesn't make sense at all.
Well, what I've said now is exactly how I've testified.
I know that. Why would she still physically touch you, interfere with you walking, when she had succeeded in getting you out of that room and you going voluntary now, just after being called by her, and according to your version, not even being led by your elbow out of that room, to your room?
Advocate, on your own version, Susan had a volatile temper. She had just caught me with my mistress that I had told her that was over for the last couple of months. So if you're asking for an explanation, she was absolutely furious. You've just put it to the court that how angry and volatile and she is. So the cat was out of the bag, so to speak. She was absolutely furious with me. So I can't tell you what was going through Susan's mind, but she was absolutely furious with me.
I put it to you that you heard the testimony of Dr. Khan and the injuries that he noted, and if necessary we'll go there to each one of them, and you had to find an excuse to explain some of these injuries. This is now the opportune time when you were walking back to your room, when she got hit by the elbow, not the soft part, when she fell, and according to you, you didn't see any injuries, but there's an explanation.
When did I say I never saw any injuries? I said that when my elbow made contact with the tip of her nose, I didn't see a nosebleed. I testified yesterday, when I got back to the room, she was screaming my fucking toe, and I saw the injury above her left eyebrow. I've never said that I didn't see any injury, so that is incorrect.
Just for completeness sake, Pharaoh Amirmia also stated that after you and Susan left the room, she could hear you. They were still talking outside the room. Want to comment?
I'm sure she would have heard us shouting outside the room. I don't deny that. I can't deny that.
And it could have taken a period of time just standing there outside the room. Would that be true?
I don't recall it like that, but I agree with you that she could have heard shouting outside the room. That I can agree with.
Now, you already testified that you were happy with the way you were treated at Spear, and that's where you supported the company to go back there in 2016, correct?
No, that's not what I said. I had no decision making as to where we go to. That's handled by some admin people. We have a certain budget. They look around the country. We're logistically, so I never, you know, it's not my decision where to go.
And my lady, I want to go into quite a lengthy detail of Mr. Desmond Daniels' evidence. I see it's almost 1:45. I know this court indicated we're...
That will settle one.
Yeah. I'm not going to finish this part of the evidence today.
Thank you. So we'll proceed on Monday.
If the court pleases.
Thank you. Mr. Rohde, we'll proceed on Monday. Thank you. Your request is granted, Mr. Fadike. We'll proceed on Monday, the 4th of June. Shall we start again at 9:30? That one.
9:30 is fine.
Thank you. We'll proceed at 9:30. If you could be here shortly after 9 and stay in attendance until I direct further. Thank you. Court is adjourned till Monday.